So let me right away move on to the next very thought-provoking conversation that we are going to have, and which will be on, yes, architecture that's set to shape the world. Architect law has already set the tone for that. So conducting this conversation is Deben Moza, Executive Director, Head of Project Management Services, Knight Frank, India. Mr. Moza has over 2 decades of professional experience in architecture, construction, project management, and corporate relocations. He has successfully delivered projects across multiple sectors that include hospitality, residential, commercial, retail, and holds key proficiency in project management, construction management, and architecture and workplace strategy. Mr. Moza, a very warm welcome to you. Let me now invite our eminent speakers of the panel in an alphabetical order. I welcome our panel member, Ms. Kavita Sastry, Principal Architect, KS Design and Chair, IIID Bengaluru. As an architect, Kavita Sastry design philosophy is a simple marriage of form and function, aesthetics and practicality. In 2016, she initiated Community Design Studio at Institute of Indian Interior Designers, Bengaluru Regional Chapter. It focuses on doing pro bono design for community projects in Bengaluru, and this collaborative studio has completed numerous government schools and orphanages, including the restoration of the 108-year-old government school in Murphytown. Our next eminent panel member, let me introduce Mohanbir Singh, Founder Director, Creative Designer Architects. Mohanbir Singh has steered notable projects of diverse typologies across Asia. With over 35 years of diverse experience, Mr. Singh commenced his professional career working with eminent architects like J. Steen, B.V. Doshi, and Laurie Baker. He completed his master's in city planning from IIT Kharagpur, and Mohanbir Singh has the experience of helming more than 50 healthcare facilities pan-Asia in span of 1.5 decades to his credit. Our next eminent panel member is Mr. Rakesh Kumar, Chief Design Officer, Godrej Properties Limited. Rakesh Kumar heads the design strategy for Godrej Properties and has over 25 years of diverse experience from various organizations, including K. Raheja Corporation, where he was Senior Vice President, Architecture and Design, Kaltaru, and Indian Hotels Company Limited, which is Taj Hotels in India. He spent over 14 years in the USA at organizations like the University of Chicago, Tishman Construction, and VOA Associates. Our next and final member, let me introduce Sridhar Rajagopal, Head of Sales Marketing, Strategy and M&A, Otis, India. Sridhar has had a variety of interesting assignments in Otis. He headed 2 JV companies in India and led the acquisition of service portfolio companies across India, Singapore, Philippines, and Japan. Prior to his current role, he headed the marketing, communication, and strategy function for the Northeast Asia region, covering Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. So this is our eminent panel, and Mr. Moza, let me hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Sapna. It was very interesting presentation which James gave. Now I think after virtual world, we should come to the real world. So welcome to all the panelists, and I'm sure we'll have some thought-provoking discussion, which would sort of help audiences in terms of navigating their business, and in terms of helping them with their future. Disasters have been catalysts for major changes in architecture. As more of us flock to urban living, city designers are rethinking buildings, and which influence our moods in the era of neuroarchitecture. We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us, mused Winston Churchill in 1943, while considering the repair of bomb-ravaged House of Commons. More than 70 years on, he would doubtless be pleased to learn that neuroscientists and psychologists have found plenty of evidence to back it up. The combined impact of climate change, the pandemic, economic instability, and increased mental health issues have caused seismic shifts in how people understand wellness. Far from being an optional amenity, wellness is now a cultural necessity. and therefore one of the fastest growing industries across the globe. The conversation is no longer whether wellness is good or bad. We know it is good. Now it's time to put wellness-based design strategies into action. Firstly, I'm privileged to be moderating this panel discussion, and I'm sure with the wealth of experience all the panelists bring to the table, we'll have an interesting discussion. I'll kick off the discussion by asking questions that draw out some high-level themes and ideas we should be thinking about for 60 minutes, and then we'll open up the chat box for Q&A, and our panelists will respond to the questions put by the audience. So let's get started. So my first question is to Kavita. This won't be the first time in the history that cities and buildings will be reimagined in response to increased understanding of disease. How the COVID-19 pandemic will change the built environment? Okay, I'll put this question to Mohanbir.
No, hello.
Sorry.
I think, sorry about that. I was waiting for the host to unmute me, but anyway. Hi, yeah. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Sapna. And coming to your question, yes. So the pandemic has, first of all, it was unprecedented. You know, it was something, it was almost surreal. We couldn't have, it was, I mean, it was right out of a sci-fi movie. What happened and the repercussions of that, I think we're still feeling. And yes, it, like you said, any disease, any, the plague, the cholera, which happened in Paris, any pandemic, when something like this happens, there is a paradigm shift, you know, in our lives, in every field of our lives. And yes, today we're discussing specifically about design. And as you rightly said, that, you know, well-being has come to the fore. It is not just our physical well-being, but also our psychological well-being. So spaces and design of spaces has to cater to that. Now, the question, though it's addressed to the city, I would like to kind of address it from the point of view of a home or a house, because house is a cell. It is a cell which makes up the city. And that is my domain of expertise. You know, this is what I've been practicing architecture, and it's mostly dwellings. And a lot of it is also social architecture and affordable housing. So anyway, coming to the house in particular and design of homes, I think, like I already said, you know, that well-being is paramount. So we are seeing a lot of spaces being incorporated in the design which cater to this. The home it has become all important. People want spaces for recreation as well. So things like your home theater, your home spas, your home gyms, of course, your work from home spaces, and gardens, breakout spaces, you know, like gardens, landscaped areas, balconies, terrace gardens. So I can see a lot of inclusion of these spaces in our design. Of course, I can, you know, having said this, climate responsive architecture, where we don't depend on artificial ventilation or light. So going back to our traditional, you know, designing, addressing the climate of that particular area. So like ours is mostly a tropical climate. So large windows, a lot of light, a lot of sunlight, because sunlight is again something that is, you know, antiviral. So a lot of sunlight, respecting the path of the sun, the path of the wind, and designing as per the geography of the place is going to be something, again, very, very big. So this is also a call to bring the outdoor in, like the courtyard houses, houses with verandas. So these are all the, the effects that will determine the design of a city or a home. And when it comes to, say, office spaces, decongestion of office spaces, or even homes are going to, maybe have bigger spaces and larger spaces, smaller rooms, more openness, so that even though you're isolated or you're in a containment zone, you still have your own sanctuary and heaven, and that's what you're making the most of. The other thing is self-reliance when it comes to design. That is not relying on imported materials, using locally available construction materials, because if there was something, and it happened only in India, that, there was a stay on construction when the first wave hit. In all other countries, it came under essential, businesses. But in India, we could not, like, all our sites were, had to come to an abrupt halt. And I think that was a very poor decision. But anyway, that's what happened. And it made us realize that, whatever's available locally, made in India, is something that we need to kind of reach out to complete our projects, instead of waiting for things to come from abroad. So the other thing, like architect Law mentioned, was fast construction. So like when you need to set up isolation facilities, things like container homes, PEB buildings, these are going to be the norm. So I would even say that there's going to be it's going to be a hybrid society, but we really don't know, because a lot of it is still a mystery which we are trying to unravel. What are the effects? So these are few of the things that will be seen a lot of. And of course, clean energy, solar energy, wind energy. So cities will be planned taking this into consideration. Each home will try to be self-reliant when it comes to its energy needs as well. And so urban planning will be also determined, keeping in mind spaces like open spaces, large gardens, where we can just walk out, keep our masks on, but still get our little bit of exercise and social interaction.
Thank you. That was very elaborate in terms of.
Oh, okay. I mean,
and we could see the impact of work from home. You can't control the situation.
No.
So I'll quickly move to Mohanbir Singh. Same question. Your views on how things, cities and buildings would be reimagined.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. And this has been elaborated by Kavita, and I guess she has covered all the questions answers in terms of some ballpark pointers, if I may say, like cell is what comprises a city. Yes, I entirely agree that cell comprises a city and is a conglomerate of the cells which actually makes up. And then everything gets added, like a human cell, then becomes the organism and things like that. Well, taking on from there, I would say that the pandemic has affected us in the last 100 years about 3 times, and every time we have not actually been able to give an appropriate response to that. I mean, as city planners, there are a lot of things that need to be considered. One is this: are we on a right path in terms of spacing out and strategizing our cities in terms of how the city is built up? If you see conventionally over the last 100 years, I mean, when Ebenezer Howard also propagated the philosophy of how the city and the garden cities should be designed, you see, the thing was that we had this CBD, which is called the Central Business District in the center, which was a very tower-like thing. And then the profile actually came down to your commercials, residential, and things like that. And then, actually sprawled onto the fringe areas. And these fringe areas were those areas where the humanity, if I may, interacted with the wild and the forest, and that became the fringe area. So this is how our cities were classically designed, and that's how we have been designing, making the master plan, so on and so forth. But now, over the years, see, if I may, let's analyze the traffic patterns that in a conventional city, what happens is that during the morning time, if you see, the complete traffic converges towards the CBD, and the evening time, the whole traffic then goes out and it is going towards the fringe areas. This is the general traffic patterns that you see in a city. Is it, you know, if comparing it with the pandemic that happens, how would you actually see this in light of that? What happens is the complete concentration goes into the CBD at that time, and then it goes out in the evening, and the complete, we are densely packing and then spreading out. You see, once we talk of the any metropolitan city or things like that, what happens is it's not just the metropolitan city, it's the satellite towns around it, about 150 kilometers. If you see Delhi, you know, there's like people from Panipat, Sonipat, and things like that coming down into Delhi and then going out. So what happens in this conventional model of a city? First, we are bringing the people into the city, and then we are kind of loading them with whatever is there, and then we are asking them to spread out, take it to their homes, and from their homes, that I'm talking in light of the pandemic only, and then the things get spread out. Based on this model, we have been kind of rethinking, I mean, all the city planners and town planners have now been rethinking the strategy. Can we not, instead of having a singular model, have a multi-model, multi-mode, kind of small modules, self-contained modules? For example, you have a few big schools, educational centers, you have a kind of residential centers, you have the commercial centers where people go to these locations. As against this, why don't we consider having a kind of a decentralized model of a city? I mean, a negative case in this point would be Calcutta, you know, which is municipalities after municipalities, municipalities after municipalities, you know, spreading out and things like that. So could we also think now, I mean, this is what being brought out in the research papers all over, is that have self-contained modules in a city comprising of neighborhood centers, you could have commercials, you could have schools, you could have health centers and things like that. So what happens is that you walk down, you take some transit system, which is less than 20 minutes, 10 minutes, go to these areas and come back. Now, in this kind of a decentralized systems, there are 2 or 3 things being achieved. I mean, from the pandemic point of view, what happens is that suppose there is some kind of an outbreak. Now, outbreak, I will tell you a little later how the outbreak actually triggers. Now, if the outbreak triggers, it is very easy for us to cordon off that module itself. Now, this module can then be segregated as a red zone, purple zone, or whatever zone category that we might label it as. And then what happens is that inside that, all the central resources, the state resources can, you know, concentrate on this and then, you know, try to contain the pandemic and then treat it properly. As against a conventional model, what we are doing is that we are first spreading it out into the complete countryside, and then we are trying to contain it. Very, very difficult effort. I mean, that is what we have been seeing, and things have been failing because of that stretching of the government resources, and then, you know, ambulances charging 5 lakhs, 4 lakhs to transport people to the hospital and things like that. So this is one system. Now, in this system, what another advantage can be that, you know, the emission of the greenhouse gases is also very much contained, because what you're doing is that by having this decentralized system, you are actually reducing the distance traveled by a family, the children to the school which is nearby, to the healthcare system which is nearby, and to the person who's working in his shop or in an office space also nearby. And then if something happens which requires a next category of treatment or something like that, then you have another system which is next level in the center, and you have the small modules around it. So this is a modular system of city which is now emerging, and as a town planner, I may say that in next, because town planning is something which happens incrementally with a lot of political will, and we as town planners also propagate some things which goes into master plans, and then takes a lot of time. But incrementally, if I may say, we have taken about maybe 100 years to come to a kind of city that we are in, and maybe with this pandemic going, we might take another 20-25 years to have a next level of cities which we decentralized. Now, the next thing which in this kind of a model which we must aim for is the buildings to have very, very low energy consumption and self-managed energy. Now, what happens is self-managed energy is that we have a system whereby in case of the complete breakdown which happens, there will be a loss of energy coming into the system naturally, because you don't know what has happened into the past system, who has taken ill or whatever, how the containment systems are working. So if there is a system of some solar backup or things like that, I mean, just saying that solar backup should be done, yes, how it should be done? It should be done in a way that each building can then become self-sufficient in some respect, at least the skeleton services of that building can continue. And now let's talk of the density of the system. Analysis of this pandemic which has been done, it is very logical for us to think, oh, there is a larger density, the higher rate of pandemic mortality or the infection rate. Well, let me tell you, the research says just the contrary. What the research says that there is a negative relationship between the density and the infection rate. So what does this point to? This point to that density itself is not responsible. It is the social infrastructure, it is the social distancing norms, and it is the failure of the state sanitation system which are actually responsible, and not providing healthcare. So density is something which actually will work in our favor by providing all this, the state systems, but we have to be prepared for that. So let's go ahead on this kind of a decentralized system in which all the green energy norms are maintained, and then we are able to provide the kind of social system for the people. Next, now we come to, let's say the next pandemic comes next year or after 2 years, it has come now, we have our minds opened and we know this is the kind of system which works for us, but still this kind of system will take an implementation of 15 years. What can we do right now? So now I will just go on those measures so we can implement right now, so that let us be prepared for the pandemic which will hit us maybe next year or 2 years after now. Now, as we are also in the healthcare, so what happens is, and a lot of people come to us and they tell us that, just excuse me, a lot of clients that they come to us and they say that they want a healthcare system right now. So now healthcare systems building can be divided into two types, if I may. One is the greenfield and the brownfield. The greenfield systems takes a lot of time to make because you have to find a land for it. It has to be in the zone where the healthcare can be built, and then there's a project cost to it and everything like that. So I'll just talk on the ecosystem of that. And any structure, any built structure in the built environment has got two phases. One phase is the economic life, and the other is the physical life. The economic life is that life of a structure in which it gives you the return for which the investment was made. The physical life is after it has outlived its life, then what happens is that now we don't know what to do with that structure, because now we have to return it to the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is not ready for it because nobody planned for it. All the plastics and glass and everything, what to do with it. So now adaptive reuse of the healthcare system, we've actually been doing it. I mean, let me tell you a number of projects that we did in this last COVID to put a lot of thousands of beds on the ground was done. A lot of malls were there, a lot of hotels were there. What we did was those people came to us that hotels are not working in a place like J&K, even in NCR, a lot of malls are not working, what to do with it. So what we did was we did adaptive reuse. We made, because structure was already ready, everything, the client was already ready. So what we did was we planned hospitals inside them. So, need of the hour, you must have read the papers and must have been directly involved in the things in such ventures, is that, a government was asking, gentlemen, please give us ways and means how we can put 1,000 beds right now. Right. So what I would say, and what would help the ecosystem as well, is that can we do adaptive reuse? Definitely we can. Let's identify those structures. Let's make the client more be responsive to that. And we have done it. So now this mall in Vaishali, we converted it into a hospital. Now it's functioning as a hospital. A hotel in J&K, I mean, it's a ravaged state in terms of whatever the disturbances are happening. The hotel industry was not working. So this client said, can you make it into a hospital? We did it. So we structure was ready. We made it and converted it into a hospital. So it's something, a structure which was lying vacant. It was a burden on the ecosystem. We made it something which could provide service to the people.
Right.
So these are the kind of adaptive reuse which I would strongly recommend, which would help the ecosystem as well, and would also extend after the investment life, it would extend the life of the structure and would reduce the demand for greenfield structures, which would still have sapped the ecosystem to take the energy and the materials and then used it. So we extended its life. So these are the kind of strategies which we can, go in for adaptive reuse.
Great, thanks. That was very informative. And you touched upon 2 points, like, creating models which sort of are self-sustained. So my question is now to Rakesh, who's the chief designer with Godrej Properties, and they're also the developers. So Mohanbir spoke about 2 things. One is creating modules which are self-sustained, that in terms of they can be mixed use developments, and then create a hub and spoke model though, so that people don't have to travel to CBD and come back. So you're reducing the time people would take to travel from point A to point B. So in Godrej, are you seeing a change in terms of strategy of or design, where you're focusing on creating more mixed use development projects than rather just having a standalone residential or a commercial complex or a retail and a hospitality? So is that something which you're seeing as a trend changing now?
Thank you, Deben. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a shift towards mixed use where people are talking about a sustainable ecosystem around you or sustainable spaces. So your spaces can be divided into, as they call it, first space, second space, and third space. So first, and this is pre-pandemic, first was your office because you were primarily spending your time at the office. Second was your home, where you were mostly sleeping after having had worked for long hours. And the third spaces are the social spaces where you actually need those for your interaction and well-being as a human species. So right now we are quite focused on residential developments, but yes, we do have townships where we are trying to integrate it with other building types and to create a sustainable environment so that people can actually, when we have used the cliched word of work, live, play, it actually comes to life. So definitely there's a shift towards mixed use, and also wherever we are doing township projects, as I mentioned, we are trying to bring in the flavor of work from anywhere as a theme, not only restricting it to work from home, because you should be productive. And with the changing trend of hybrid working, we see that these kind of spaces will help you in being efficient even when you're working from off-site locations. So that is something that we're seeing as a changing trend in the near future.
Great. Thanks so much. So my next question is to Sridhar. Will the pandemic encourage a change in type of material that architects use in their design? Like, you represent Otis, and now vertical transportation is lifeline for all the buildings because we're going vertical in terms of architecture. So how has elevator industry changed its approach during pandemic? So I can't say post-pandemic because we're still going through the third wave and nobody knows what's going to come next. But how has your approach changed in terms of design or materials? Because we're talking about touchless gadgets. So how Otis is approaching that?
Thank you, Deben. Am I audible, Deben?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Very good morning to everybody on the panel and the audience. Some very interesting changes going on. The simple things like having a Bluetooth and using the mobile phone to call the lift and to select the floor is something we've already implemented. There's an Otis solution called e-call. In fact, it's there at the Godrej one property in Vikroli in Mumbai. It was the first site where we implemented this. So touchless is and using Bluetooth is a near technology which is there for a long time. So it's tried and tested. So it's readily available. Things like air purifiers on top of elevators there was an initial fear that is elevator being a closed space, something which will transmit the infection. So we did a lot of studies on this, and so we put an air purifier on top of the elevator now. So these simple tools are readily available. I would like to focus, Deben, on one other aspect here. See, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is to have gratitude for the people who service us, the field employees. Through the pandemic, our field people maintained contamination zones and hospitals without fear of their own infection. And this gratitude has to be not enough if you say it has to be built into the design of the way we do our towns and our buildings, like Mohanbir and Rakesh pointed out. And here I would like to talk about two things. One is, if you look at a construction site, a mega site, there are almost 1,000 plus people who work at the site. And the typical way of moving is an almanac kind of equipment, which is outside the building. Now, Otis has got a self-climbing elevator, which we have launched more than a year ago, which is inside the building, works in the hoistway of the building, and has a hydraulic system to climb. And below the climbing deck, it climbs with the building. As the building is going up, the elevator moves one floor up with every movement of the floor of the building. And below that, the elevator is working at 3 meters per second or 2 meters per second, a normal functioning elevator, and which makes sure that the workers at the site can move throughout the year, all weather you can, because it's inside the hoistway and it's a closed elevator, and moving at normal speed and in a safe manner so that there is no congestion at the site. And this could save them more than an hour of working time in a day if we can build, and this is available readily. We just need a few notches on the different floors of the building, and we can set up a self-climbing elevator. So the construction site is an area of congestion and something we should work to decongest, and the self-climbing elevator in which the Otis team is on the top floor in the working deck and installing the rails for the next floor. And below there is a normal elevator working at 3 meters per second is something to think about. Another innovation is like a prefabricated elevator. In the yard where the concrete for the building is being made, we can make a concrete hoistway, pre-install the rails and guides and basic equipment of the elevator, and literally plonk the hoistway into the building to save the time of construction. Because when you are installing an elevator, there's a lot of coordination between the installation team and the general contractor. There is a lot of interface to be done. We can avoid a lot of this and get a prefab elevator with just the cabs and a few things which need to be added, plonked into the hoistway. So a couple of examples I wanted to share where we need to build design into helping the people who actually do the construction work. And later on, from a service standpoint also, using tools like IoT to enable ease of remote elevator maintenance, and something we'll talk about when we speak about the technology aspects later today. But these are a couple of the easy ones I won't even talk about. Touchless is that stuff which is already there with us. But let's talk about the hard things about designing pre-construction stage, how the site working team, construction team can have very high ease of execution.
That's very interesting. Kavita, your thoughts on the materials or change in the materials post the pandemic spread. So how things are shaping up in terms of specifications and using different kind of materials, either in homes or in commercial buildings?
So there are two aspects to this. One is what I said, that using locally available material. One is because it is easy. We have easy access to it. It's the travel miles are less. The other thing is also that it connects you to your roots. So I'm seeing that clients are more open. Like, it's not always, for example, flooring. When you look at flooring, um, everybody wants the Italian marble, but I was able to convince quite a few clients to use the locally available kadapa stone, which is what were there in our old houses, old homes. There's another, I mean, there are a lot of local stones. There's Kota, there's Bekum Chavla, there's Indian marble, and Jaisalmer. So there's a lot of beautiful Indian material locally available and sourced easily that is gaining popularity. It's, the clients are open to this idea. So this is what I would say when it comes to materials in particular.
Thank you. So designs are being redefined by sustainability. How are you evolving your organization and design processes to deliver innovation aimed at helping clients and communities become more resourceful, resilient, and regenerative? Do you see a resurgence of sustainable architecture during pandemic? So this is to Rakesh.
Thanks, Deben. In 2021, we saw freak weather phenomenon across the world, like flooding in China, Germany. And since it happened during the pandemic, it seemed like it had a link. But actually, there is a push for, integration of outdoor spaces and naturally ventilated spaces. This is something that Kavita touched upon. And also work from home is also triggering a change in design. And as I mentioned, that sustainability has to be inherent. It has to be the center stage of design. The rest of the things will follow. Now in India, we have to be cost effective. Kitna deti is a cliched question that everybody asks, how much mileage do you get out of a car? And that is applicable in every aspect of any business that you talk about. So our over dependence on mechanical means has actually overshadowed the principles of climate responsive design. And I know Kavita touched upon it, but it's a simple, cost-effective way of reducing your energy consumption. A simple reorientation of the building, understanding the solar path, understanding how the wind flows, and integrating it with design, it actually reduces your energy consumption. And these are zero input cost, because this is the planning that you can do rather than creating a monstrosity of glass buildings facing west and then trying to triple glaze and air condition it. It's counterintuitive. Unfortunately, it should be avoided. So I'll give you a few examples. We are working on a project in Delhi, and of course, we know now with pollution and of course with the temperature soaring every year, we took upon a challenge that how can we reduce the temperature of the complex, and working with the architects and working with energy simulation agencies, we worked a lot on the master plan, understanding how the wind flows, how the sun orientation is, which is the hottest part of the day. And these are basic things that we learned during our school days, but it's a matter of applying it. So we combined it with swale locations, water bodies, and water bodies not only for aesthetic or visual pleasure, it was more of a scientific way of creating a microclimate. And so we have done desktop simulations and all. We are seeing a reduction of almost 8.3 degrees in the month of June. And we are quite confident that we want to go back and reconfirm once the project is done to ensure that, our hypothesis is working. If it doesn't work to its extent that we are designing it to, we want to tweak our approach and making sure that, this kind of approach gives us maximum benefit. And this kind of temperature reduction will be significant. And in addition to all our master planning that we have done, overall, we feel the calculations are showing that we are able to reduce energy consumption in the entire complex by 10%. Now that's significant. So it reduces your capital cost and your AMCs and maintenance costs, which will be a benefit to all the residents who will stay there. Another area that we're exploring is net zero and low carbon footprint buildings. Net zero is, of course, very ambitious. In large campuses, it's possible, but in residential development, it is difficult. So what we're taking baby steps, see if we can convert some of our clubhouses on the amenities, if not net zero, close to net zero. And as we have seen due to the pandemic, people want to be outdoors. So we're using naturally ventilated spaces, all the techniques that have existed, creating courtyards, creating verandas. That's the way our buildings in India should be designed so that it benefits from the wealth of information that our forefathers have had in designing the buildings, and they had no dependence on mechanical means. So I think if architects are conscious and really apply themselves, so these are very low-hanging fruits that can easily be harnessed. So that can go a long way. And of course, if we are able to reduce the energy consumption or monthly maintenance that a resident has to pay, of course, it's a huge benefit. And also that awareness also comes that if you design sustainable buildings or complexes, you can reduce energy consumption. Another area that I want to touch upon is, and again, it's a very cost-effective way of applying these kind of concepts, are basically looking at biodiversity and planting of native species. We will be landscaping every project, but rather than keeping it to just ornamental plantation, look back at the biodiversity of the region and plant the correct trees so that helps the species to flourish. And it's an ecosystem. So if the ecosystem grows, it also benefits us. And we have seen amazing amount of growth in the biodiversity by just implementing these small, these measures. And one of the things that we are trying to focus and research more is the discussion about planting native species. Now, you have to really get to the depth of it, because many of the species that have survived for last 100 years also have been classified as native species. But actually, you have to go back maybe 500 years, 1,000 years, because these species have to go through that whole cycle of drought and all the extreme weather conditions. And then they have survived, they have become resilient over time. So this is just a natural way of, preventing any invasive, disease. And these, some of the trees that we have seen, like the rain tree in Mumbai, this is not a local species. And we have seen a lot of rain trees actually just suddenly died. Nobody had an explanation. But again, these could be because of some virus invasion of bacteria or God knows what might have caused that. But if you look at some of the very local and long-lasting trees in our region, they are very sustainable. So one of the ways that that will benefit us, and of course every region has its own history of how humanity has evolved over time. So we have a symbiotic relationship, which could be harnessed better if you really focus on these small little measures, not a very very expensive measures to create a problem and then solve it.
Thanks. So Mohanbir, you have experience of working in both the West and in India. I think we've been blindly following West for quite some time in terms of architecture and just creating these glass boxes, which Rakesh also touched upon. Uh, so are you seeing any change in terms of sustainable architecture because of COVID, or now because we become we've also, I think, Government of India has committed a net zero to achieve net zero by 2050. So, and there are even the clients nowadays they talk about ESG and all. So, do you see the change in trend and focus more on sustainability, or rather than just pure aesthetics and creating all those glass boxes?
Okay. As Rakesh has just pointed out, and he has touched upon all these questions which you have just mentioned, answers to these. Just a little elaborate on that. Yes, there has been some kind of intermixing of the architecture from the West and the East and everywhere, trying to create a kind of concoction and things like that. But I think the architects, the really responsible and mature architects know what's to be delivered, and they are doing it. So most of them are, and most of we in part of that are thinking in the right terms. But the only question and the stumbling blocks are kind of the mindset of the people, kind of demands or some kind of or natural calamities that come upon us and things like that. And that brings us to the realization what actually architecture should be delivering, and not the, like you said, just for aesthetics part of it. And those realizations are just dawning upon us right now. So from that point of view, I think one or two aspects which are now will be the dominant trends in architecture would be the eco architecture, definitely, and the universal design. The concept of I'll touch upon both these two topics. Otherwise, there are two or three things as an immersive architecture and things like that. But I'll just touch briefly on these. And as Rakesh has already elaborated on the eco architecture and the sustainability issues and the native species of the trees, which are all very valid things and which should be implemented. And just taking that thought forward is that whatever is the built system that we are putting into the built environment, that system is, like I said, it is going to be there after the investment life of the structure as well. So what happens to the structure after that? That is what our concern should be. See, energy conservation, yes, we should be doing it because we are facing a crunch of the fossil fuels and things like that. But once that structure is to be delivered back into the ecosystem, what are our thoughts about it? So like now, if we use the native materials and things like that, which can be recycled back, that would be one aspect of doing it. These are the quantifiable issues. What are the non-quantifiable, or the other issues are like that, where in the ecosystem, like Rakesh also pointed out, the biodiversity issue, which is a very valid issue. I mean, this campus for AIMS that we were doing in Guwahati, what happened was that this was in the banks of Brahmaputra, and there's just a lot of water coming in and out. So what was the strategy? I mean, the best of drainage system that you could have devised there would not have worked because of the inundation of the water which comes in just part of the moment. So we went in for a lot of traditional system, which was making a lot of ponds into the campus. So and a lot of swales. So what happens is when the water suddenly comes into the campus, these ponds are already there to absorb the water. Another thing, once I went to the site, I noticed that the workmen were fishing for that fishes inside that pond. So I asked them, where did these fishes come from? They said they come with the water. So I understood there is some biodiversity connection between the water which inundates into that. So what I did was I connected all these ponds because these fishes are coming from somewhere. So as if I'm going to have an kind of interjection into their biodiversity, I'm the intruder. They are not. So what I did was I connected all these ponds, so these fishes could merrily go from one pond to the other pond, and from that pond to the other pond, and then merrily go wherever they wanted. So I connected the biodiversity system. So this I only came to know once I went there and saw. But before that, I knew that I had to take care of the water which was coming in. But my awareness that these biodiversity issues have to be looked into, along with the plantation of the native trees that very well pointed out, and all these things go on to showing us sensitivity that we are the ones who have to become part of the nature, and not that we have to just go in and save our species only. The thought has now changed. If the nature survives, we survive. So it's not just we have to look for our own survival and have energy conservation measures, but we have to take the biodiversity along with us. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, like you pointed out, what is our approach to the architecture after this pandemic or even before that? In 1980s, there was a term coined called as the universal design. What universal design actually says is that design for everyone. So what this means is what basically is that every person, not just the average person, the young, the old, the fat, the thin, the disabled, should be able to take advantage of the design which we as architects are putting in, not only for the people who can actually are fit and healthy. So now, for example, I'll just take a little example. Let's say in a healthcare design, a patient is walking into the hospital system and doesn't know where to go, what to do, probably impaired, not in a mental state, and not able to fully concentrate on where to walking. So how do we take care of that person? First of all, there should be no steps. Probably there should be railings, which will be double level for the wheelchair and for the person who's walking. Then once you come in, then there should be some kind of a system of arrows on the ground so that they can be told, please follow the yellow line, the red line, or the blue line on the floor itself. So they don't need to ask anyone, they can go. Next, when they are inside, probably they can't read. So there should be a push button where the instructions are audible. So once they go inside, they have a system where either they can sit down and write something, or they can stand and write something. So things like that. And our furniture as well, the medical furniture now is making a system which is adaptable. You can take down the examination table, you can take up the examination table, you can tilt it from the foot up, you can tilt it from that head up. All these things, they go into the universal design. Then you have for bariatric patients who are very fat, so we have a special rooms for them. So all this should get translated into our society as well. So this goes into the universal design aspect. So these are the two aspects, I believe, which will be taking the forefront of architecture in the coming years. Oops.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Sridhar. From start to finish, technology affects the way architects design the building, and even the way the clients experience the design process. How is Otis, coping up with the changes in technology, with all the changes that are happening? So how is Otis approaching that?
Yeah, thanks, Deben. Actually, it is from start to finish, like you rightly said. So we are now able to do a full simulation of the traffic analysis for a site, using technologies like our traffic simulator, and also a system like Compass Plus, which is actually a destination management system. So the entire movement of people through a building can be simulated, and we can visualize, along with the designer, the number of elevators needed, the number of, because the biggest problem is a building which is under elevated. You have long queues of people standing after the building has been put in place, and it's really impossible to fix it post facto. So the entire traffic simulation and working with builders to make sure that we are able to move people efficiently through the building is something we are doing already, simulating, and we can handle that. Another area where we are looking at it is augmented reality in our engineering labs. So what happens when we design a new elevator? We have to do a whole bunch of tests in terms of load bearing ability and others. And all of this, when we do a tech transfer from, let's say, our lead design center in US to India, is done through a simulation and through video calls and through augmented reality. So the time taken for a tech transfer is today crushed to just about 4 to 6 months instead of 1 year. And the final thing is a very practical thing in terms of so we have about 90,000 elevators across India, and we are now starting on a program to have a simple reader of the controller and SIM card and connecting all the elevators to a central control room. Imagine like a NASA control room with about 10-15 screens, and we can see the movement of all our elevators. The elevator, as you know, is an automatic car moving in the hoistway, so it is 100% self-contained. So the controller in the machine room tells the elevator exactly what to do every step of the way. And we have an ability to read that. And the moment the elevator is down, we will know it before the building people come to know. And we can dispatch people to go and fix it before a complaint is raised. And also take something like the elevator inspection. You know, at the end of every installation, there is an inspector who will come and inspect to award the certificate. All this drama can be fairly avoided if it can be done remotely. We can facilitate an inspection through a video call with the inspector community and get it cleared in a matter of an hour instead of figuring out when the person will come and how the inspection can be done. So literally the tools are here now. The key is for the building community, the designers, architects, and vendors like Otis to sit together and work it out for the next project. What are all the things that we can do to minimize congestion, to improve the design ability remotely, and small things like inspection can also be taken care of. So it's here and it's time for us to use them.
Thank you so much. I'm under pressure from Sapna that I had to close it within 60 minutes. So just to summarize the discussion, the coronavirus has reminded us that we can see many challenges coming if we pay attention and listen to the experts like yourselves. We can't wait until we're overwhelmed. We need to be proactive, not reactive. Do we want our response to be as flat-footed as world's initial response to COVID-19? Let's learn from this tragedy. Let's find a silver lining. Thank you very much for this fantastic panel discussion and sharing your thoughts with me and with audience. I'm sure everybody would have learned a lot today. Over to you, Sapna.
That was indeed a very interesting discussion. Deben, one question that we have received just now is, we are seeing design-led innovations, whether it is Apple iPhones or IKEA products, just some of the examples. Are we seeing similar trend in terms of building design where the innovations are being led by design? Deben, let's start from you. What's your experience?
In fact, presentation before our panel discussion, talked about the innovation in design. So that's the future design. I think what was talked about is, creating those virtual platforms and the modularity in design and sustainable design. So, that's the future. We're talking about 3D printing happening. So, unless we don't have those, those designs in place which are modular and which are sustainable, we can't do 3D printing. So, and technology. So we're talking about the usage of BIM modeling. You're talking about, using of drones, using of robots in the construction. So, it's a complete chain, right? From the design to construction. We're talking about the technology impacting the whole thing. So, as my fellow panelists said, we are going through that change, and it's ever evolving. So we can't. The day we start evolving and innovating, we're dead.
That's right. That's right. So one line answer from our other panel members also, Mr. Mohanbir, are we going to see product innovation, especially in this building industry, being led by design?
See, the thing is, I can just tell you something about my experience from the healthcare design. What is now happening is that, in terms of COVID also, we were going to the hospital. In the times to come, let me just tell you, the times are now going to change. The hospital is going to come to you. Now, how's that going to happen? You are going to be given some devices. These are called the wearable devices. You're going to wear it, maybe it'll become a fashion statement or something, and they're going to give you, take the complete data from your body in terms of whatever sugar level, body blood pressure level, and transmit it to your doctor there. He's going to be monitoring it. And once it passes certain level, I mean, you don't have to go to the hospital every time. You are being told by your email or something like that, now you require this kind of a treatment, that kind of an intervention, come on the telemedicine. So telemedicine is another next level. After the wearable, you go to the telemedicine and then you get connected to the hospital. Hospital advises you.
That's
Imagine the sustainability. You're not traveling to the hospital every time, straining the infrastructure of the transportation, the greenhouse gases, and the load in the hospital and things like that. So in the healthcare design, like you said, the innovations in the Apple and everything, please wait for next 2 or 3 years. I mean, since we are involved in lots and lots of hospitals, everything, lots of changes are going to come the next 2 or 3 years.
Yes, we have an example of Apple Watches where they have sent a distress signal to the healthcare if the person is in
That is just the
distress.
beginning of it.
Yeah, so that is a beginning. Mr. Rakesh Kumar, how are you seeing, are we going to see products being, designed through a designer's perspective?
Definitely, there is a shift, or at least people are thinking about how to integrate technology and improve customer experience. And it is very interesting what Mohanbir said, that now hospital come to you. So one of the innovations we did was it is very similar to you having a car driven to your house to test drive it. So we created a van which had an immersive experience of show, sample flat, or the entire master plan. And we actually sent it to the locations where people wanted to experience it, because at that time, with COVID at its full swing, people were not willing to come to our showrooms. And of course, we took all the measures of safety and sanitizing these vans. And we got a very good response, because people could just walk down their apartment and go experience it. And come back. So these are one of the few innovations, and we'll continue to have innovations in real estate. But it is interesting that I was reading a report by KPMG. Real estate has the least amount of technology infusion as compared to other industries. Maybe in construction it is very less, or at least there's now talks about robotics and 3D printing and things like that. So design has been ahead of the curve in terms of integration of some technology, being one of it. The next revolution that you'll see is in parametric and data-led design, where your assessment of a plan will be better compared to an intuitive or a manual way of testing it. So these things you'll start seeing, and of course, metaverse is another thing that we have to start accepting it, or it was all.
That's
So
right.
here, yeah, I just like to add that,
Yeah.
it's also due to the pandemic, and we can see this, that, our clients are literally coming into our homes, into our personal spaces. So all these Zoom meetings, in a way, they are good because they are very efficient. You're able to get your point across, and without, hanging around at site and getting into lengthy discussions. So I think upskilling and getting virtual skills like renders, mood boards, walkthroughs. So this is where virtual design comes in to the rescue. So we were able to continue the design process through the pandemic, through working from home, thanks to technology like this. The other thing, what you said about product, one product which I think is going to really come in big is what I was talking about, container construction. So it's not just about homes being set up, but also hospitals, schools, and where time is, where the time between the two waves is all the time you have to construct. So this fast construction is one product. And the third thing I'd like to talk about here is home automation. What Rakesh was saying, that there's not enough inclusion of people are now a little more open to the idea of home automation and door video phones and that kind of stuff. So automated kitchens, lighting automation. Yeah.
That's right. So necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. So with COVID, we are now moving on to automation, as Rakesh mentioned, that the virtual experience of the home, went to the customers instead of customers coming to the site. Pop-up architecture is something we are seeing where you can have something which is dismantleable after its use. So Mr. Sridhar, you are the product guy here. In a lot of products in other streams we have seen which are used also for the design statement. One example is Apple iPhone. So are you seeing that similar sentiments here where innovation is being used also for its design statement?
Absolutely. I think what people want is the experience and the service. The product is only a means to it. And in the elevator also, we realized this. For long, we have been an engineering focused company, but now we are reshaping the industry and ourselves to be customer centric. I'll give you an example. Now, when we connect the elevators, we can put an LCD screen in it, by which, let's say, a passenger is trapped. They press the button and they can actually talk to our helpline and see this and get comfort that the engineer is on the way to rescue them. So really the design element we are talking about is bringing together existing pieces of technology in a way that it is meaningful to the user today, right now, rather than in the future. So
that's right. Yeah. So the car itself is quite aesthetically designed. So that's a design statement, and it's intelligent and smart to function. So that's the innovation that the product companies are doing. Thanks so much for that wonderful session, and thanks to our expert moderator of the session, Mr. Deben, Moza, for that wonderful moderation with our speakers. Thank you so much, Mr. Mohanbir, Singh, Rakesh, Kumar, Mr. Sridhar, Rajagopal, and Kavita Sastry. We are seeing here, the power of technology. We have speakers from Delhi, from Mumbai, from Bengaluru, joining us. So fantastic to see everyone here today on this platform. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.